for being here, for accepting the wonderful talk and dialogue. And I just would like to give you a very brief introduction of CSPS, Center for Studies of Plural Societies, which was established in 2022, just after during the COVID. The primary idea was that CSPS should provide a platform, should become a space for very pluralistic, representative space for argumentation and for very diverse kind of argumentation. And at the same time, we also wanted to provide young scholars, students, a place for training, for exposure, for understanding. In this way, we have been providing multiple programs for training for them, for both for master students and PhD students as well. Among many programs, there are some PhD book grants, research paper awards, other kind of grants are also being awarded by CSPS. In the last 3.5 years or 4 years now, of course, we have achieved so many things, and we have been successful in providing that kind of space. And fortunately, you might notice that we have done so many book discussions, and mostly we had organized the first book discussions for many authors, especially in at this office. And after that, it has become quite known and popular among intellectual circles in Delhi and outside Delhi. In this way, we have been a good place to get the book known by the right audience. And I completely believe that your book is also going to be received very valuably by almost all audience, and especially the young scholars. At CSPS, we have been interacting with the entire diversity of intellectual thought in India, so that we can have a dialogue for what we call as a just and sustainable future for our country. And as a result, we also do not belong to any political ideology, party, any religious identity or religious organization, completely secular, completely neutral, objective. And we simply make one rule here at this table, that everything on this table can be discussed and talked as long as this idea or argument can be made within the limits of academic standards. Everything which can be defended by academic standard is open to discussion and debate here at this table. So as a result, we have found very interesting, and Professor Rajiv Bhargava was here a few months, maybe last year. And he was so excited to have that discussion, and he made this remark that first time he is interacting with such a bright group of scholars who have challenged him so much that he promised us to stay here for 2 hours, and instead he stayed here for almost 4.5 hours. So this was the energy of Professor Bhargava. So again, I would like to thank you, Mr. Ravi, Sanjay, Kumar sir, and Satya, Prakash, and Sajjan for your presence here, and everyone here who have come here to attend this event. And I would like to hand over the program to you. So over to you, sir.
No, I think since I would be chairing the session, and I don't know, I would have the energy of Professor Rajiv Bhargava, who has been my colleague at my office, and we have worked together for many, many years. Certainly, I can't stay for 4.5 hours. That's for sure. I am very mechanical in my life. 4 to 6 means, for me, it's 4 to 6. That's all. So, on a lighter note, but I think the format should be, the author should have a chance first to speak about the book, because at least I cannot claim that I have read the book. I have seen glimpses of the book. Some of you may not have also read the book. So for the benefit of the audience, I would request the author, Dr. Ravi Mishra ji, to say 5-7 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, to tell us about what is there in the book. And then we have 2 discussions. So 2 discussions we'll have there, say about what do they find about the book, their critique, their as appreciation, whatever they want to say about the book, and then we can open it up for discussion among a small group of people. So, Ravi.
Thank you very much.
And I must also just half a minute that I have missed two other occasions of being part of the book discussion. There were two other occasions and Ravi ji and the organizers had invited me for that, but I couldn't come because of my prior engagement. I am very happy that this is my first visit to CSPS. And normally when I try to go to a new institute, I try to find out कौन है, क्या करते हैं. I think Hilal knows you very well. Yes. So I checked with Hilal and Hilal told me, you have been part of one of our something in CSDS, some research methodology course. Yeah, very long he kept telling me about the institute and about you.
So good, I must say,
good that I knew a little bit about the institute and now I'm here.
Mishra. I must say that I'm delighted that on this occasion you could find the time and you were in Delhi. Because given your distinguished background in the field for a long time, I was really looking forward to your presence in a discussion on the book. So I'm delighted and personally thankful that you could find time for this. And of course, I'm personally thankful to Satya Prakash ji, Dr. Sajjan Kumar, and CSPS for giving me this opportunity to present the findings of my book very briefly here and then leave it to the discussants. So I would just narrate the journey of how I started on this book and my main findings. That's all. So I think I should be able to conclude in 7 to 8 minutes. My interest in this subject, that is the subject of demography, political representation, and delimitation, goes back about a quarter century to the turn of the millennium. I was at that time a student in Delhi's Jawaharlal Nehru University. And as we know, during the 1990s, the regional disparities in social and economic development had started widening while they had been there earlier. And then in 2000, the report of the 11th Finance Commission that was headed by Mr. A.M. Khusro, who was a senior administrator, IAS officer, came out. And when the report came out, many politicians, whom I don't want to name, not only disagreed, there was an organized protest, according to which it was claimed that the North was being given a disproportionate share of the revenues collected by the central government in its process of fiscal devolution. And the North had failed to control its population. The North had failed to sort of pursue progressive social and economic policies. And the North had also failed to control its budget deficits and fiscal deficits, etc. Yet it was being given a larger share because of its higher population. Now, this question became quite big at that time, and I became curious. Then the next year in 2001, the freeze on population-based delimitation, as it is required in the Constitution, and as it was placed in 1976 through the 42nd Amendment, was extended for 25 years. So these were two things that came very close to each other, that came close in time to each other. I got interested in this subject. And there were two questions that I asked myself. First is, why is the population of the North growing faster than that of the South for the last many decades? And the second question I asked myself, what are the reasons behind the increase in the regional social and economic disparity between the North and the South. The second question, also, when I started my study, I looked into that question as well, and I have actually studied that matter over the decades. But because of pragmatic reasons, the book would have become unwieldy and it would have lost its focus. I have only tangentially touched upon this question of North-South economic and or social and economic divide or development divide. But the first question of why is the North's population growing faster than that of the South and what does it have to do with political representation is the question that I have sought to answer in the book. Now, being trained as a student of history or rather being trained as a historian, my mind naturally went to the first censuses, modern censuses of India, that is from 1872. And as I started looking at the data, I mean, the first 4-5 censuses from 1872 to 1921, it took me a couple of years. I realized that, or rather, this is what I felt, that demographic transition, which is a global process that has happened in virtually every region, every country, and every sub-region of a country around the world over the last 300 years or so, is started in the southern India in 1881 itself. As a result of which, and if I may take the liberty of just elaborating how demographic transition starts. Demographic transition starts when there is a sudden or significant fall in mortality, whether it is infant mortality, child mortality, or overall mortality. Generally, it doesn't happen because of an increase in fertility or birth rate. So what happens is mortality suddenly declines, but fertility remains the same for 1 or 2 generations, and that is what creates a bulge. So the evidence collected from censuses, district gazetteers, and other such government sources indicated that demographic transition in India started in the South in 1881 itself, and much of the South grew at a comparatively rapid pace from 1881 itself. On the other hand, the North remained stagnant for about half a century. North's population started growing in any measurable or appreciable way only from 1921. I have given the facts, but this is not the occasion to go into all the facts. And this gave me further clue about my research. As I started looking at the demographic trends, then I realized that there was a disconnect between facts on the ground and the debate on delimitation as it was playing out in the hallowed halls of the Lok Sabha and in the media in 2001. When, for the same reasons that South has controlled its population, North hasn't, and we must incentivize population control, the freeze was extended. This is what induced me to take a deeper study of regional demographic transition in the country. I also realized that this demographic transition has not been studied in India over the long run. Most of the demographers, economists, human development experts have looked at the population growth or evolution in the post-1971 or at most post-1951 period only, without bothering to check the records of the earlier period. I think one reason also was that there was no continuous data series available from 1881 onwards. I have constructed the data on the basis of a continuous series of data, and that has been that's a task that has taken me actually several years. So long-term comparative analysis, why have I taken a long-term comparative analysis is the question that would naturally be asked. And my simple answer is that demographic transition intrinsically is a process that unfolds over at least 100, 200 years. In the West, it has unfolded over 300 years. Therefore, in my opinion, it is only natural that a process which extends over centuries should also be studied over that entire period if we want to arrive at an objective, empirical, balanced understanding of the phenomenon. Of course, nothing stops a person from studying it at any point, and people are free to do that, but this was my understanding. And I also wanted to take note of the various debates at the international and national levels that had a direct implication for political representation and public policy towards population growth. Most importantly, the consequences of such policies for the political narrative on democratic representation in India, which one might argue prevented course correction in policies, especially with regard to the conceptual basis of delimitation. So, my study that has just been published in the form of the book, which is here, Demography, Representation, Delimitation, the North-South Divide in India, indicates that all four regions of India, and I have classified the four regions North, South, East, West as follows. North, in my study, consists of the Hindi belt alone, the whole Hindi belt. West is Gujarat and Maharashtra. South, self-evidently, the present 5 states, but since 2011 census had only 4 states, I have referred to only 4 states, and East includes Orissa, Bengal and Assam. So I found that all these 4 regions have witnessed comparative growth, or rather comparable growth, which can be described as relatively high, all 4 regions. I'm talking about cumulative growth here. And the peak growth phases of each of these regions have lasted for about 4 to 5 decades. Now, another important thing that I found was that, and this is important from the perspective of delimitation, that over 1881 to 1971, the North had the lowest cumulative growth of about 115% as compared to South at 193%, West 168%, and East 213%. These are approximate figures, as we know that in historical calculations of this kind, there is a small statistical margin of error, which I have duly mentioned in the book. Over 1881 to 2011, if we take this whole period, again, the North had a cumulative growth of 425%, South 445%, West 500%, and East 535%. When we come to shares of each of these regions, again, the North's population share fell from about 50% in 1881 to 42% in 1971. That of South rose from 22% in 1881 to 26% in 1951 and was still 25% in 1971. So the share of the East rose from 12% in 1881 to almost 15% in 1971, of the West from about 13% to 14%. In the light of these facts, my study concludes it is difficult to establish a causal relation between family planning and population control in India, especially during the first 2-3 decades after independence. When family planning assumed importance in the 1960s under the influence of the flawed Western notion of population explosion, and I have dedicated one full chapter to the role of the West in spreading these ideas of population explosion, population bomb, and the geopolitical origins of these notions. So by this time, when these ideas became important, most southern states had already grown rapidly for 90 years. They had experienced much of their demographic transition already. A gradual decline, therefore, in fertility and growth in the demographic scenario of the South was inevitable. But I must point out that till 1991, the population of the southern states kept growing rapidly, around 20%. So 20% and above is the peak growth phase, you could say. It was only around that time, that is in the 1960s, that the North entered its peak growth phase. And these facts have been largely overlooked in the political debates on the subject. The consequence has been a misplaced emphasis only on some factors and regions with regard to population growth, making the debate, in my opinion, unnecessarily shrill and polemical without a basis in the relevant long-term historical empirical evidence. The freeze on the expansion and reallocation of the Lok Sabha seats has undermined the constitutional provisions and the democratic principle of equality of representation. At present, the North and Western India are grossly underrepresented. The East is almost even, while the South remains overrepresented. The average Lok Sabha constituency in the South has just about 21 lakh people, in the North 31 lakh people, and in the West 28 lakh people. While the divide in representation is generally thought in terms of North versus South, my study indicates that mainly because of the South's earlier spurt in population growth starting in the late 19th century, it is more like the South versus the rest. Thank you very much.
Yeah, 10, 12 minutes. Initial time.
Yeah. Thank you to all, CSPS, the chair, author, and Satya, and the esteemed audience. Since the structure and the argument of the book has been laid down quite lucidly, I'd just like to initially build on what the book's argument in practice is implying. So when you see, this is about perception and reality. And many a times, perceptions are stronger than reality because we tend to internalize them, because the perceptions have a better shelf life. Now, one of the perception is that South India rationalized its population while the North failed to control the same. And this perception is not only something that South Indians believe into, a great section of northern population and intelligentsia also share the same. So it's a strong perception. So this is one. The second part is, and the book title is also about that, the North and South divide. Now, what is the genesis of this framing? North versus South. Is it limited just to delimitation, to the question of population? Or is it something more intrinsic? What is the anthropological journey of this framing? North versus South or South versus North? We need to go. Who are the propagator of this framing? Who are the ones who have been forefronting this framing to study India or aspects of India at these different junctures of time? Because it will help us understand the contours of the contemporary debate on demography and delimitation. The third aspect is, if we take the argument, and since Satya sir is expert on legality and constitutionality, so I'll touch more on the political policy and its other implication part. If we take the argument of, say, for example, the South and North, it cannot just stop at treating the state boundaries as sacrosanct. It will further percolate to many other dimensions. Why should suppose we, for the sake of argument, treat state as the unit of analysis for allocation of the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha seats, then tomorrow what will prevent a section of citizenry from within the state to say that fine, but within a state also you have different communities, different groups, let's divide the voting right if you violate one person, one vote, not within the state uniformly, but also as per the community by studying their population growth patterns. So that way, this is a question about how the South and North are dominating the debate, wherein West is almost invisible. It is not even a footnote. East India is not even a part of the index of the debate. And therein it is, the perception is that South rationalized its population by policy control. Successive governments, politicians, political parties championed family planning, population control, and thereby it was a disciplined policy success which resulted into the rationalization of population, and therefore their success should not be punished. And North's failure in not implementing population control and family planning should not be rewarded. That is the perception. Now, as we say, we need to go, and Ravi sir had just laid down that demographic transitions do not happen in a matter of a couple of decades. It is always measured in a long durée. People do not produce children keeping in mind how many Lok Sabha seats we are going to get for our constituency. That is never the inspiration or motivation. You do not start rationalizing your population, saying whether we are independent country or we are a colonial country or we are into 21st century. That is never the consideration. And we also need to see that globally the demographic transition theory says that every society undergoes 3 phases of transition. One, when your population is stagnant, because high birth rate is matched by high mortality rate. So therefore, it remains stagnant. Then comes some notion of development, nutritional availability, primary health care. Birth rate remains high, but mortality rates undergoes significantly low, and you go for a population boom. Your population peaks. So the region which witnesses early development, witnesses less mortality, and the population peaks, which has been the case of the centers of colonial authorities, that is southern states and part of eastern states, primarily Bengal. And the third comes as the demography peaks, the population base of the aging population starts dominating, and you go for a terminal decline, which is happening to the countries like Japan, Russia, etc. Now, this is the 3-phase demographic transition which has been happening across the globe. And in India, as the book eloquently establishes, by studying the population census data from 1881, that different regions of India and within regions, different states of India have gone through these 3 phases at different junctures. So there is no point in assuming that one part rationalized its population growth while the other region failed. It's just that someone's peak phase, that is the second phase, came quite early, sometimes a century early or a 90 years earlier, while the other parts, mainly the north and the west, entered it quite late. Now, if you go by the assumption that population is a problem, now that itself is erroneous, because in 1950s itself population explosion was considered to be a serious crisis because of the cyclical famine, very residual growth rate, etc. But even if you, for the sake of argument, take this population is a problem. Now, if population is a problem, there is a comparable international analogy. And that analogy about the climate change, carbon emission. So many a times you see the global north versus global south. What is the argument? That it's a shared responsibility.
But the global south said that yes, it is a shared responsibility, but it is a shared differential responsibility. Polluters shall pay. Throughout the 18th and 19th century, the global north polluted the earth. And then today, when it is asking, yes, it should be addressed collectively, but the responsibility has to be differentiated. So similarly, in the case, if we take, for the sake of argument, that population growth is problematic, then one needs to go into the empirical fact that who doubled their population first. By 1931, and starting point remains 1881. Kerala was the first state to double its population in a matter of just 50 years. By 1941, Tamil Nadu doubled its population. And by 1971, all the southern states had doubled their population. And if you compare the growth of population growth of north and the western states adjusted to the current boundaries, this is very crucial because many people confuse that no, that time boundaries were different. You have Bangladesh, you have Pakistan, but the data is adjusted to the current administrative units. You find that until 1921, North India's growth was stagnant when Southern India was growing at a excessively higher pace. East was growing fast and West was also stagnant comparable to the North. So northern states started growing significantly only after 1951-61, and it was 71 when they entered the peak phase. And precisely that was the time when southern state politicians, a section of them, started raising the issue of North's explosive population growth. So what is the politics here? Politics is what should be the starting point. Should it be 1951 census? Or should it be 1881 census? That question can be resolved because it's a policy question. It has political angle to it. It has emotional angle invested to it. That you go into the reality of the demographic transition theory. Can it be measured in a matter of couple of decades? Or should it be measured in a long durée? And the established scholarship suggests it's settled that it is always into the long durée. Second aspect is, when we see the framing of the debate, South versus the North, we do know that North-South divide is not just about the delimitation, population, who pays how much tax per person and how much it receives in return, because these are some of the prosperous states from the western and the southern region have been crying foul about that the cow belt or the Hindi heartland has been sucking up the major tax share which is contributed by the southern and the western state. That has been the argument by many, not necessarily from the south also. We saw in Maharashtra's case also many times in a subtle way from Gujarat also. No. Now, if we take that aspect, then we do see that yes, there may be a south versus north divide, but we do know the journey of the framing of the debate in the framework of South versus North is almost a century old, starting from the Justice Party, anti-Brahmin movement in Tamil Nadu, dubbing that Brahmins in South India are the northern Aryans who invaded South. They cannot be considered authentic Dravidian. And we do know the history of Justice Party and later the DMK until 1962 war, when Government of India Home Ministry did not declare secessionist ideology as unconstitutional, wherein DMK under Annadurai would have been banned to contest into election. It was a party that was fighting to secede from India, Greater Dravid land. And that time it was not an economic issue. It was not a population issue. That time the issue was cultural, regional, linguistic. Today it is about population and finance. So what is happening? It seems that the framing is the end game. For that you keep on changing the variables at different juncture of time as per your convenience. And that has been the case. Third aspect, when you, and I think Satya Prakash sir will dwell more on that, when you measure the contribution financial contribution, and the book discusses that, no one takes into cognizance that how the national policies in the founding decades, went against the interest of the Hindi heartland. Primarily, if you take into cognizance the freight equalization policy, that the minerals producing states will not have any geographical advantage. Why? Because to spur the industrial growth, Government of India ensured that minerals will be available across India at the same rate. So what will happen? Why should industries move to Bihar and Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh or Odisha? They will all go to the coastal belt, because you have the geographical advantage of being the coastal areas, and you also have the mineral availability at the same price. Are you not punishing already a backward region which languished during the colonial rule by depriving it of the geographical? What is the geographical advantage of many of the central and northern states? It's the availability of the minerals. We do not have the coastal advantage. Now that parity was lost because of the faulty policy, and you never cried foul. And today also, if you see, when you talk about the prosperity and the growth, you go to the nucleus center of the new growth models, which is primarily centered around Chennai, Hyderabad, Pune, Mumbai, now Nagpur, and you have NCR region. Now, which is the skilled, semi-skilled, highly skilled and unskilled population? The major bulk comes from the northern states. Primarily, their contribution into the economic growth of the region is never taken into cognizance. So you see, there is a very systematic scholarship which cherry picks to demonize the Hindi heartland by excluding the policy disadvantages that this region has suffered, not only during the colonial time, but also during the independence journey. Now, take for example this entire framing of the debate that South is being punished and therefore it may create a chaotic civil war sort of a situation. And in a subtle subtext, even the mainstream political party politician, and I am saying even from the BJP, and I can name that the General Secretary for organization says that, okay, the percentage will not be changed. Who has said, who has made it an official policy that percentage of the Lok Sabha seats will not be changed? What is the point of 1%, one vote? Cabinet mission plan laid down that 10 lakh population is the unit for one Lok Sabha, one seats in Lok Sabha. Then why should that be broken? Now, even the mainstream political parties and politicians from the South forget about the ones who are vested into parochial regional propaganda. In a way, give a message that South will not take it kindly. So this is a subtle subtext, communication that there is going to be an internal rupture. And for the sake of peace and harmony, the North should compromise to a formula wherein one person, one vote principle shall be violated. What is its position constitutionally? Satya Prakash sir will dwell better into. Now, here the point is, and one small fact, that based on 1961 population, and many people do not take into cognizance, the Lok Sabha seats of Uttar Pradesh in 1961 until 1971 was 86, not 85. 5 seats later went to Uttarakhand, and today it's 80 seats. The number of Lok Sabha seats of Uttar Pradesh was reduced by 1 seat. Have you ever heard that any politician, any section of the society from Uttar Pradesh ever cried foul that how come our number of Lok Sabha representation is declining? And correspondingly, in the same time, the number of seats of Karnataka increased from 26 to 28 seats, which is the current tally of Lok Sabha. Number of seats for Kerala in Lok Sabha increased from 18 seats to 20 seats. Now you see the geographical size of Kerala comparable to Haryana and Punjab. Haryana has 10 seats Punjab has 13 seats. Kerala has 20 seats. It's the most overrepresented state in India. So that way, this entire bogey of emotional outburst, you see, North never cried foul when its number of seats was reduced. And so what is wrong if today, when North is into its demographic transition phase, peak phase, is going to be increased and South will see a corresponding lessening, wherein already the formula is that the existing number of or tally of seats perhaps will not be reduced. It's only the ratio of increase that will be affected. So therefore, we need to be cognizant that there is a very strong lobby behind this entire framing of the debate of South versus North, wherein along with the North, the substantial beneficiary of the delimitation exercise is going to be the Western states, Maharashtra and Gujarat. At least these two states contribute to the taxes. So why should it not be called South versus the West when their tax and fiscal contribution is comparable? So who are the ones who are creating this South versus North framing? And where is this, this myth of last point, this South lobby? One statement from Kamal Hassan about the origin of the Kannada language, we saw where does the southern, so this entire southern framing is basically imaginary framing, south of Vindhyas, south versus north. This is something you create when you want to constitute a common other, and that common other has a century old journey, which was not necessarily demographic and economic. It was cultural, it was caste centric, it was race centric, and it has its own ecosystem, and therefore that framing needs to be critically interrogated also. So that is basically what I am trying to bring something explicit from the structure of the book, which is very much implicit when you read it between the lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Sajjan.
Thank you, Raviji, for coming out with such a wonderful work. And it's very timely, and that is why it's being discussed not just here, but various other forums. At the very outset, I would like to say that there are certain non-negotiables in any democratic system. And one person, one vote, one value. That is one of the non-negotiables. Second, as Sajjan has pointed out, the debate has been framed in a very wrong way. North versus South. While it is much more serious than what is being projected. Serious in the sense, what is at stake is the very core of our democratic value. If you compromise on such issues, then there is a slippery slope, and where you are going to stop, you never know. Even in advanced democracies, let's say United States, they have 435, if I remember it correctly, seats in the House of Representatives. The number of seats has remained the same since 1930. But after they conduct delimitation exercise and readjustment of seats. That's a different thing that most of these states, if I remember it correctly again, 37 states, their seats have remained unchanged. What we see is California being the largest state, it has the largest number of seats in the House of Representatives and also in the Electoral College. We must be aware about it because recently the presidential elections were held. It has 54 Electoral College votes and 52 seats in the House of Representatives. The second is Texas, which has 40 seats, 40 Electoral College votes and 38 seats. North Dakota, which has just one Electoral College, one seat and 3 Electoral College votes, cannot say we should be having the same number of seats in the House of Representatives or same number of votes, Electoral College votes. European Union, which has 720 members, Again, Denmark has just 15 seats. Germany has 96. Cyprus and Malta, they have 6 seats each because they have less than 1% of the entire population of the European Union. So this is the accepted, widely accepted, or rather I would say universally accepted fact or principle that similar number of people should be represented in the House of Representative, that's Lok Sabha. So one, it cannot be the case that in Uttar Pradesh, 20 or 30 lakh people will have one seat, and in Tamil Nadu, just 10 lakh people should have one seat. So this will be in gross violation of basic constitutional principles. So this has to be kept in mind. Why this is a very dangerous and slippery slope? Because today we are saying that it is north versus south. Tomorrow, somebody might say within a particular area, say Western UP, which has substantial population of Muslims, or Simanchal in Bihar, which has substantial population of Muslims, somebody might come up with the idea that since Muslim population has grown so fast in a very small span of time and TFR is quite high, which is a fact, particularly in Kishanganj and Araria. That's a different thing, that the highest TFR in Bihar is that of Sivhar, which is surrounded by East Champaran, Sitamarhi and Muzaffarpur. But somebody might say because pockets of a particular state where Muslim or minority population is there, or say tribal population, that's a different thing, that they have a separate provision for that. They should not be given much more seat, and that should be factored in, like what is being demanded from South, that should be factored in while conducting the delimitation exercise. So that's why I said it is a very slippery slope. This argument has to be nipped in the bud. Then there are some economic arguments which have been extended regarding tax collection or boards. I'm saying with a particular state also, say Uttar Pradesh, the amount of tax collected from Noida and Lucknow would be perhaps the highest. So can it be the argument of people living in these areas that this money cannot be spent on Muzaffarnagar or Gorakhpur or some other areas? Because that will demolish the entire idea of having nation or a state or a collective existence. So these notions have very limited kind of applicability. One can have these things or consider it, but these cannot be things which actually determine something like delimitation, which is a constitutionally mandated exercise, and based on what one person, one vote, one value, and the exercise is conducted in order to ensure that people are represented in the house in a very equitable fashion. Third is, I said within a particular state, say, I'm giving you the example of Bihar, North Bihar and South Bihar. North Bihar, the population growth is very high. In fact, Sivhar is 4.1 or 4.2 perhaps. Araria again 4. These are all Araria, Kishanganj 4 plus TFR. While southern districts which are south of the Ganges, like Patna has 2.6. Many other districts have just 3. So within, suppose delimitation exercise is also meant for states, redrawing the boundaries of state assemblies. So somebody from South Bihar might say, why should Araria have or Kishanganj have much more number of seats in the assembly? And precisely because these are Muslim dominated areas. So I'm again repeating, this is a slippery slope. We should not go down this lane because the consequences could be very harsh. From a constitutional standpoint, if we accede to the demands being made by politicians from the South, what is going to be the fallout? we'll be violating the most basic principle of constitution. We'll be violating most of the key phrases or terms used in the preamble. And that is preamble of the constitution. Democracy. It is part of, it's mentioned in, so we'll be violating the most basic principle of democracy. Then justice, social, economic, and political. So political justice will go for a toss. And then equality. It will be violative of Article 14. Any such exercise will be violative of Article 14. The only exception that was carved out was through 31st Amendment to the Constitution. And that was for states having populations less than 6 million. And they're all mostly special category states, smaller states. So unless the southern states prove through evidence that they fall in that category, but then they don't have this 6 million population. They have much higher population. So there has been an exception carved out for smaller states, but they are all special category states, not in terms of what the central government categorizes for aid, because of their geography and other factors. So I am saying this argument that South has managed to, as Dr. Mishra has pointed out, that to say that states have managed to control population in entire South, or they have failed in the entire North, this also at least it's not supported by data. In fact, to the contrary, what happened was during emergency, 1.07 crore, that is 1 crore 7 lakh people were sterilized mainly in the North. Why this problem has arisen is because of political advocism, which has resulted in a sort of constitutional advocism. In 1976, when it was frozen through 46th Amendment. 42nd Amendment. It was because Mrs. Gandhi believed that North was against her. So she chose to freeze it. When Vajpayee government extended it till 2026, the government was in minority. It was supported by TDP and smaller groups even from Tamil Nadu. So it was difficult for the government of the day to come out with something which was in tune with the constitutional mandate. So a serious constitutional exercise has been held hostage to politics. And this is the saddest part of this entire debate. Why it is being debated today is one of the reasons is the so-called Hindi heartland is dominated by BJP. If the seats are increased in the same proportion, so people are saying it would be 846 or maybe 850 seats because new parliament is ready. And accordingly, if you go by that, then UP Lok Sabha seats, it would be somewhere around 145 or something. Bihar could be 75, 79, like this. I'm saying simply because BJP is likely to get benefit, there are certain voices which are opposed to it. But once you accept this principle, then it can be replicated in separate groups. If it is in a state, if it is acceptable constitutionally or politically or as a society we accept it, then the groups, some people are trying to defeat by stalling delimitation or by creating this north-south divide or by saying that it should not be based on population because North has failed to control its population. If it is replicated to, say, Kishangarh, Simanchal or Western UP, then who are going to be the losers, or it will be to the disadvantage of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, because North has quite a huge number of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe people, and minorities means mostly Muslims. So this is, again, I'm repeating, this is a slippery slope. This must be rejected at any cost, because this people are not realizing it is not North versus South. People are represented in the House, not groups. The only exception is for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the Article 330. And that too, it was for just 10 years. And Article 334 is being amended every time. Last amendment happened through 104th Amendment. It has been extended till 2030. But then, apart from scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, the only other group which was given representation was Anglo-Indian group, which has now been done away with. So beyond that, it is pure and simple. Each vote is considered to be equal. Finally, if it is accepted that South is giving much more tax or generating much more revenue, again, if you replicate it, there is a group of people, 4 to 6%, who are paying income tax. They can say that we should win much more, we should have much greater say in the
Reservation of seats for them.
reservation of seats for them. Income tax pay constituencies, like in 6 of the states where we have upper houses, there are constituencies represented by teachers and blah blah, separate groups. They might demand that there should be a separate quota for them, income tax pay. The industrialists who are paying much more taxes, say Ambani or Adani, they might say, we are giving you much more tax, so we should have much more. This is the entire debate. At the heart of it is the most basic democratic principle, which must not be compromised. If we do that, then you will realize within a decade where we are heading to. So this has to be nipped in the bud.
See, when the last delimitation exercise took place, which was in 2006, 2008 and 2009 Lok Sabha election, is the first Lok Sabha election which was contested after the previous delimitation. I remember very, very clearly, there were hardly any debate on this issue. Hardly any debate. At least I can say that my organization and my ex-colleague Yogendra Yadav, and we tied up with Prakash Narayan's institute at that time. What was that, in Hyderabad? And we organized a lot of discussion on that. And I still remember an MP who was a co-opted member, who was going to be the co-opted. I'm just trying to put it in the context. So we started a discussion at about 10 and it went on till 2, and we said lunch break karne ki zarurat hai. And I still remember line, जारी रखिए हम लोग को इसके बारे में कोई ज्ञान ही नहीं है कि क्या होना है. दिस इज इन हिंदी. जारी रखिए, हमको कुछ ज्ञान ही नहीं है इसके बारे में, और हम कोऑप्टेड मेंबर हैं, हमको क्या करना है पता ही नहीं है. तो द पॉइंट इज 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was hardly any discussion on this. And now, if you look at the big focus on this issue, look at the newspaper, lot of articles. Look at the book which has come out, very interesting fact in this book. And this is the third discussion on the book. Maybe I have missed out one, but fourth discussion on the book.
One in Russia.
One in Russia. लीजिए, रशिया में भी delimitation हिंदुस्तान पे हो रहा है. So you can imagine how
Moscow University, Indology, HSC, no?
Okay. So the point I'm trying to say is that there is a lot of focus, lot of concern about what is going to happen in delimitation. Author and the two panelists are almost in consensus about, that this whole issue of North-South divide and freezing the number of seats, proportion, etc. should not work out, because that's going to be dangerous. I fully agree that it has been kept captive for a very, very long time, and at some point of time it has to be unfolded. Someone has to take that step. The data is there about population growth rate state by state by. First thing about North-South, I think this is being used as a metaphor, because if you say If Chandrababu Naidu says Andhra, 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 then nobody, he won't be able to bring people together. So North-South is just a metaphor to be used to bring Southern states chief minister together, because finally it is the state where delimitation will take place. It is at the state level. It's not at the north, south, west, east, etc. My just one question would be, okay, we all agree that population, like this north-south divide, south, the freeze should not freeze need to be lifted, and population may be, say, the criteria, because southern states are opposed to that. They are saying that population should not be the criteria. So what would be Mishra ji's advice to the government if somebody says, so tell me one criteria. Which population? Should we take last 1 decade? Should we take 2 decades? Should we take the average from 51 to 2026, 2021? So what if somebody asks you, so give me 2 points. Karna kya chahiye? We just want to take your
My
advice.
simple advice would be follow the constitution.
Follow the constitution.
Yes, the constitution says it very clearly. That
One person, one vote,
not
one
just
value.
that, says as far as practicable, the ratio between
Same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Follow the constitution. Once we follow the constitution, certainly compromises and paths can be found, because I very well understand the point of what you are saying. There is, of course, a certain opinion in some region that somehow this is something that should not be done. But as I said, if we follow the constitution, certainly we can find a way out of this problem.
Suppose, just a follow-up question and then I will open it. We know that this is going to be very, very controversial, in a sense. There is going to be a contestation which is already there. It's already there, a huge contestation. Would you even think that can we think of taking an average of population growth for a much longer period of time? Maybe say from whatever, maybe 51 to, from the time delimitation started taking place, 51 to 21.
Let me.
Will that be a reasonable criteria?
I understand. Let me say, put it like this. As I said, if we follow the constitution, the problem can be resolved. The constitution says it.
Problem will not be resolved.
No.
That's the point.
At least that's what I believe. Now, so the constitution says it clearly that every census shall be followed by delimitation, which means that delimitation according to constitution
Has to take place every
based
10 years.
on the latest census.
Yes.
That is what it says. There is no provision, to the best of my knowledge, about taking any average of 2 decades or 3 decades or 5 decades. Of course, it is the wisdom of policymakers. My job as a scholar was just to collect evidence, build up a perspective.
And that you have done beautifully.
Present it.
And that you have done very systematically, beautifully. This is going to be referred.
I'm not presumptuous enough to think that it is for people like me to decide what is going to happen. My only contribution is that I thought that the debate has not sort of, been based on empirical evidence and on a sort of, a proper perspective, and therefore as a scholar I should try to bring that out. So you are very right. Maybe, people, policymakers will think of something, but as far as the legal constitutional principle is concerned, no such thing is currently there. I can certainly see. Now, one hypothetical scenario I would like to point out. Why is it that the present is important and not the past in these matters? In 1881, the North, as I have shown in the book, contributed about 50% of India's population. The South contributed about 22%. Now, suppose, I'm just giving an example. Suppose in the first elections of 1951-52, instead of taking the census of 1951 as the frame of reference, we had come up with an idea like this, that okay, either we can take the population percentages or proportions of 1881, because the South's population has grown much faster than that of the North, or we could find out some kind of average of 5 decades, 6 decades, or 7 decades. Would it have worked? I don't know. But this is my short answer to your question.
Yes. Very much fascinating discussion. I think that we have got a fair idea of what exactly we are going to have the big debate. I'm just trying to understand about the idea of representation. Who exactly in India is missing from representation? Whether I'm not sure, the constitution says that it is the people's representation, not the geography, not the territory. So the state as an idea of geography, as a territory, they don't have any right of being represented. It is the people who are living there. And by the size of a population, we have decided that 1 million for one seat.
But state is also represented in the
Delimitation is about
the state as a constitutional body, administrative block. So what I'm trying to understand is who is missing from this representation, and I'm trying to understand. For example, you have underlined the question of Muslims in Simanchal and Western UP, where the Muslims might have a chance to get a fair representation, and it is. Maybe it is coincidence, and maybe it is many Muslims say that it is a kind of a conspiracy of India's elite. There are many seats in India which were supposed to send a Muslim representative. And somehow the Election Commission of India gets the merit that this seat should be declared as SC and ST seat. So the possibility of getting a Muslim candidate, Muslim representation from that seat, for example, if...
No, just to correct the fact, first, Election Commission of India does not make a constituency SC or ST reserve. It is done by the Delimitation Commission, and there is a strict formula, carefully formula according to which seat will be reserved for an ST or an SC is designed. It is not whimsical. There is a flexibility for ST. Simple criteria. If in a state 10 seats are to be reserved for ST, the seats which has highest proportion of ST population, that has to be reserved, irrespective of whether ST is 10%, which is in the cut, and Muslims are 80%. It will not be reserved for Muslim, it will be reserved for an ST. SC, there is some flexibility. The flexibility is two criteria are involved. First, proportionately higher proportion of Dalit population. Proportionately.
Not absolutely.
Proportionately, and the second criteria is as far as possible it should be dispersed. So suppose this is one state and relatively higher proportion of Dalits are in all the constituencies which are in one corner. So all these constituencies will not be reserved in one corner. They have to ensure dispersion. But for ST, only criteria is highest proportion. I'm not saying that some politics has not taken place in the last delimitation.
And there are a sociological add to Sanjay sir's point, because the perception you are laying down is a perception across India. Reason being that when you go sociologically, majority of the communally shared areas wherein you find Muslims and Hindus living together, among the Hindus, into the communally shared areas, it would be either Dalits or lower OBCs. So that is why it will never be Muslims and dominant intermediary caste or Muslims and upper castes. So therefore this perception is quite also because of the sociological reality that the shared religious areas across India, you go anywhere, you take the sample.
I'm not just focusing on Muslims.
Please ask your question and then Sanjay.
I'm not just focusing on Muslims, but I just try to highlight we need to explore the idea of representation. And famously, Anthony Giddens has used this sentence: democracy needs to be democratized. Because democracy is still it's not much democratic. So when we talk about democracy should be democratized, it means the idea of representation should also be explored beyond the tight boundaries of what we say as maybe constitution, but we need to see the diversity of the people in India, and we need to identify which section of the society is not getting fair representation, and whether this could be a consideration for this new delimitation.
These are the issues which Satya Prakash ji was
Just
also
one
mentioned,
sentence-
Sajjan also
Just
mentioned.
one sentence I would add what fell from the chair and Sanjay. A certain degree of gerrymandering cannot be ruled out.
Yeah,
So it happens across the globe.
yeah. Sanjay ji?
Basically, I have some questions like I'm a practitioner. I'm working with the last mind of the society, like homeless population. I'm working.
Homeless folk.
Yeah, homeless population. Basically, they are the migrant population. They're coming from different parts of India and living in Delhi. And then for last 20 to 25 years, we have been advocating for their voting rights. Unfortunately, we are able to find some place in the voting list, and they become like a citizen of India now. So, to bring these new narratives, I think this kind of population, they are getting any place in your book or giving any kind of any, like in Delhi. Delhi is larger, a big city. And there are many people, they have migrated from Pune to Delhi in search of better livelihood. Like we have been also migrated from Bihar. I'm from Patna, but living in Delhi for last 33 years. Now I became a voter of here. Similarly, my younger brothers who used to be from Patna, but now they are living in the Karnataka and all with the whole family and all. So this kind of populations, migration tendency and trend. So where we are going to, talk them, and especially those population. In fact, they are living on the ground. They are living in the corner of the societies. So where they will find this?
There are two aspects to what you have said. The first, of course, as you gave the example of your own family, you and your brother migrated from Bihar, and you have become a voter only recently in Delhi.
No, I'm here for 90.
No, you said I have become a voter recently.
No, I'm a voter for the last
I
2
understand.
decades. Yeah.
So one thing is that there is a migration of people from one part of the country to the other, and sometimes they choose to become voters in the place where they have settled. To the best of my knowledge, in most parts of India, or maybe in all parts of India, there is no resistance from the authorities in registering somebody as a voter in a place where the person ordinarily lives. Of course, there will be a process that will have to be followed. In every country, that has to happen. My understanding is, though I have not really gone deeply into this issue, but my understanding is that a large number of migrants choose to remain voters only in the place from where they migrated. We are nobody to dispute, on this matter because it is their choice. I, for example, witness a lot of migrants from Bihar and some other places that when elections happen, they go back and they tell me that yes, I have voted in the elections there. So you see, what matters in democracy is not where you vote. What matters in democracy is that as an individual citizen, you have a voice and you have an equal voice in the electoral process. And the rest is your choice. Of course, if there are any specific examples where there are hurdles or etc., that's a different thing. Now, the second aspect of what you said is regarding people who are homeless, if I understood it correctly.
Yes.
Now, the
Marginalized, homeless.
no, I think there is a difference because we cannot club marginalized because marginalized is more of a subjective category. Many people can feel marginalized, but homeless is a positivist category, as I would put it.
I will take half a minute on a lighter note. I was giving a lecture in Shimla in a faculty development program. So I was just telling them how do we classify the class. And I was telling them that we ask several questions on class, etc., and these are the 4 classes based on your income, etc. So then one person, and I said, we have divided it into 4 classes. Someone who is owning a house, owning a car, we classify them as rich in India. Somebody having a house and a car. And this is an assistant professor working for last, maybe associate professor working for last 10, he was sitting on the first row. He was ekdam bechain, and he stood up his hand and said, what? He said, no, but your classification is wrong. So I'm talking about subjectivity. Classification is wrong. I said, kya ho gaya? No, but going by your definition, you will put me in a rich. I said, okay, you are rich. You have a, no, I don't have a house. I have a car. I don't have a house. I live in a rented house. I said, okay, theek hai. So the debate went on for a couple of minutes. I said, theek hai yaar, if you're not rich, you may fall in middle class criteria. There are several criteria. He said, no, I don't agree. And he was a very strong objection. एकदम मतलब दिल से वो नाराज हो रहा था. I said, then which class do you belong to? He said, I am a poor person in this country. I said, भगवान करे पूरे देश का आबादी ऐसे ही गरीब हो जाए. हाँ, 1.5 लाख की तनख्वाह, लेकिन आप कहते हो मैं पुअर हूँ, तब इस सब्जेक्टिविटी का क्या?
Yeah, that is what.
Sorry, आपका बीच में रोक लिया. इस सब्जेक्टिविटी को कुछ नहीं कर सकते.
This is such a relevant and brilliant intervention, I would say. In fact, that is why I was avoiding getting into this. Because the world that people construct is partly objective and partly subjective. One may be a king and still feel that he is weak, marginalized, and poor. It has happened in history. After all, I can cite examples to you. And one can.
Here I am referring.
One can be
homeless. Yeah, what he's trying to say, homeless and marginalized doesn't go together.
I was just trying to put them into neat categories for the sake of
Homeless.
analysis. I understand that you were talking about it in a different way. So anyway, my point is that as far as homeless people are concerned, certainly the system does not prevent them from voting. They have to register themselves in some place, because a lot of people may be, say, homeless here in Delhi. They might be sleeping under a flyover. They may not have any place where they might want to register themselves. But it is quite likely that they are registered in some other place. Of course, there are examples of, and they go and vote there. There may be examples of people who are truly homeless and who actually don't have any documents to prove their identity, etc. Certainly, just a moment. Certainly, in the case of such people, the effort of the authorities of the state has been to minimize to the extent possible, this kind of a situation, and everybody is sought to be registered, documented, etc. And the voter card obviously is sought to be made for everybody. I have not looked into this issue specifically. I cannot say what is the percentage of people who still sort of, despite all the efforts of the authorities, not been able to register because of homelessness. I would not be able to.
But that's not the issue which will get reflected.
Because I have not discussed it.
Anyone else? हिंदी अंग्रेजी दो भाषा हम समझ सकते हैं.
नहीं, हिंदी में तो कोई प्रॉब्लम
मैं कह रहा हूँ.
आप उर्दू में पूछना चाहते हैं तो
तीसरी कोई भाषा हो तो अलग बात है. मतलब हम तो दो ही भाषा समझ पाए.
आप पूछिए, जिस भाषा का तो कोई
तीसरी भाषा भी आप समझते हैं. उर्दू. अच्छा, उर्दू. हाँ, हम सब हमारी हिंदी एक ही है.
एक ही है.
हम एक ही है.
माँ मौसी के समान है, ऐसे ही है.
नॉर्थ ईस्ट का हम लोग कम इस पर चर्चा कर पाए.
मैंने कहा 31st amendment deals with states having population less than 6%. So for them there is a separate category. They can be. They are Arunachal.
One seat.
So they have been given seats despite not fulfilling the general criteria, which determine
Exceptions. There are exceptions.
So I'm saying north and south, they are in similarly situated situations.
One more thing, मायावती ने लास्ट टर्म में बिल्कुल आखिरी टाइम पर उन्होंने स्टेट को डिवाइड करने का फैसला लिया था. पश्चिमांचल या
4 स्टेट
किसी विचार में करें और 16 में डिवाइड का सोचा, लेकिन आगे बढ़ा.
and I think that idea is still there. And there may come some at a time in Uttar Pradesh, अगर मायावती की सरकार आती है, किसी की भी इस तरह की आती है, again they may propose the idea to divide Uttar Pradesh, which is the biggest state. तो फिर वो रिप्रेजेंटेशन उस वक्त तक क्यों रोका जाएगा, या अगर हम अभी डिवाइड कर देते हैं तो जिनकी सीट, जिस एरिया में हम सीट बढ़ा रहे हैं उनको
एरिया में नहीं बढ़ता है, एरिया में सीट नहीं बढ़ता है। You have to understand the process।
अभी तो हम एक स्टेट के तौर पर बढ़ा रहे हैं ना, अभी
स्टेट में
जब वो डिवाइड हो जाएगा स्टेट,
तो जिस जैसे बिहार डिवाइड हुआ, जैसे उत्तराखंड डिवाइड हुआ, जैसे छत्तीसगढ़ डिवाइड हुआ, उस हिस्से की सीट चली जाती है।
जिस जिले की, जिस सब डिस्ट्रिक्ट की जो पॉपुलेशन है, उसकी कैलकुलेशन के आधार पर इवनली सीट्स डिस्ट्रीब्यूट की जाती है।
थोड़ा बहुत एडजस्टमेंट करना होता है, जैसे झारखंड
उत्तराखंड में हुआ, उत्तराखंड में हुआ।
एग्जांपल देता हूँ कि जैसा कहा गया कि यूनाइटेड बिहार में जो हम अपने बचपन में फिगर याद करते थे कि 54 सीट, सबसे बड़ी स्टेट यूपी की 85 सीटें,
85
जो 1980s और 90s में हम लोग जब पढ़ रहे थे तब याद कर रहे थे, और बिहार की 54 है, और तीसरे नंबर पर महाराष्ट्र 48 है। बिहार डिवाइड हुआ, 2000 में डिवाइड हुआ, तो 54 में से 14 सीटें जो झारखंड में पड़ती थी वो झारखंड में चली गई, और बिहार 40 बच गए। That is all। इसी तरह से दूसरी स्टेट्स में
यूपी में 5 उधर चली गई, 80
लेकिन इसमें फिर एक क्लासिफिकेशन भी हुआ था। पटना पहले 1 सीट हुआ करता था, बाद में उसको 2 बना दिया।
वो तो डिलिमिटेशन हुआ ना 2008 में, उस समय नहीं हुआ था, उस समय नहीं।
That is
delimitation without changing the number
of seats. तो असम में हुआ अभी रिसेंटली,
वो तो डिलिमिटेशन हुआ 2006 और 8 के बीच में, तब वो
और असम में सर रिसेंटली हुआ, उसमें काजीरंगा नहीं सीट
आगे बढ़ा है।
तो एक चीज आपको कि मायावती आती है या कोई ऐसी सरकार आती है, so changing the boundaries of the state, which is
Central government,
it is power is vested in power. So long as the party which is ruling at the center is not interested,
नहीं, अगर एक ऐसा हाइपोथेटिकली हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं, हाइपोथेटिकली अगर एक ऐसा टाइम आता है जिसमें सेंटर और स्टेट दोनों एग्री कर जाते हैं कि ठीक है यूपी को डिवाइड कर दीजिए, ठीक है, फिर उसके बाद लखनऊ की पॉपुलेशन अभी ऑलमोस्ट मेरा ख्याल है 6 मिलियन होगी, ठीक है, तो अगर लखनऊ की पॉपुलेशन 6 मिलियन है तो टेक्निकली लखनऊ शुड हैव एटलीस्ट कम से कम 2 सीटें 3 सीटें।
वैसे नहीं होता है, प्रोसेस को पूरा समझना पड़ेगा।
पॉपुलेशन
लखनऊ के नहीं होगा, ये यूपी है, यहाँ पे पॉपुलेशन ज्यादा है, यहाँ पे कम है, लेकिन पूरे यूपी का पॉपुलेशन देखेंगे और हम डिवाइड करेंगे उसको, मान लीजिए कि लखनऊ यूपी को 200 सीटें मिल रही है, ठीक है, तो पूरे पॉपुलेशन को डिवाइड करेंगे, ठीक है, तो यहाँ की कंस्टिट्यूएंसी साइज जो छोटी होगी, यहाँ की बड़ी होगी। लखनऊ में चाहे वो 10 गुना पॉपुलेशन हो तो उस वहां पे सीटें ज्यादा।
आप राजस्थान या मध्य प्रदेश की एक लोकसभा या वहां की राजस्थान की कई विधानसभा मतलब नॉर्थ इंडिया के बहुत यूपी बिहार के लोकसभा से के बराबर होती है। कारण यह है कि एरिया बहुत बड़ा है पर डेंसिटी कम, ठीक है, तो उसमें कोई बहुत फर्क है। दूसरी बात देख लीजिए, जाटों के अलावे कोई नहीं चाहता है कि वेस्टर्न यूपी बने, ये सब
वो तो एक अलग
लीडर जानते हैं,
वो सब वो पूछना चाहते हैं, वो डिबेट छोड़ दीजिए, 16 बनेगा या
I'm from Kerala, the very much heart of this debate. So like I had this question and we have the narrative like in down south that if the pandemic kind of this delimitation exercise comes in, there would be a huge shift in the end-to-end mandate. Like mostly the policies or the campaign will be focused on none other part of India. I don't want to divide these states. I'm talking about Kerala. So, do you think that there is some relevance or that perception, like the campaigning and other focus on north of India, does that affect the southern part of India?
Can I take this? Even today, North is dominating the parliament,
Yes.
irrespective of which party is. So, do you think South has been discriminated against? In fact, South is doing quite well on all the social and economic indicators. And North, despite having better political representation in the both upper and lower house, they are not doing well. So this is a misnomer that having better political representation or in better numbers, if you are represented in political institutions, you will do well. There are other factors also. In fact, South is doing well despite not having better representation or greater representation in Parliament. There are other factors, and other factors are beyond politics.
Like you won't have a rebuttal. Just you can.
Just
We will allow you one rebuttal.
Just, I'm saying, this is, suppose Adani has to start a port. He will not start a port in Bihar. He will start a port in Tribune. So there are other factors which are beyond politics, and they are also at play. So this, to say that having better representation only will ensure better gains in terms of economic gains, this is a fallacy. And the worst example are northern states, which are lagging behind on almost all social and economic indicators, particularly Bihar.
You have a follow-up question.
Yes,
Just उनको पूछ लीजिए फिर आपको मिलेगा.
Just one.
Yes.
So like even if like the electoral campaign itself, अगर उनको North India जीतना ही है, why would they campaign or why would they lay out policies like what you call it to kind of to attract the Southern India?
See, one of the assumption you are making is always that to mobilize the electorate, it is always going to be state that is going to be the unit. What if tomorrow a party comes that start mobilizing the Dalits? Will it be confined to just state and geographical boundaries? What if there comes a party like OICs or MIM, will he be going to respect the geographical boundary? He will go to mobilize a particular community across. So your question has one assumption. And that is my point also, that why should we treat the state to be the mobilizational unit of India's policy and politics? It is one of the unit, but there are other competing units which are as valid, and this entire South-North divide framing of the debate doesn't take into cognizance that there are other emotionally groups which has been the potential mobilizational unit. Let me give you one example. This is also concerned to who are the ones who are not being represented or who are the ones who are losing out. Now, if you calculate the population share of Dalits, tribals and Muslim minorities from 1951 to 2011, their collective share has increased to 9%. So it is in absolute terms, it is the SC, ST and the Muslims who basically are losing, because and I can give you from 1951 SC share was 14.4%, 2011 it grew to 16.6, 2.2%. For Muslims it was 9.8 to 14.4, almost 5%.
क्या चीज में है 9?
Sir, population. I mean, total share of SCs in total population in 51.
अच्छा.
It was so it was 14.4. Today it's 2011 it's 16.6, so almost 2.2%. For Muslims it's from 9.8 to 14.4, so almost 4.5. And for ST also from 5.6 to 8.6. So collectively they constitute for the 9% of India's growth. So primarily it's the SCs, STs and Muslims who are most underrepresented. Now why should state boundary should be the most potent and privileged category? That is my response. When you privilege it, I mean, you are from Kerala, it's not that, into the fault line, but if you go from the Tamil Nadu, when they talk about the Dravidian legacy, don't they bring these categories as the core of their legacy? Now, when you demonize the North, which has substantial minority, SC and ST population, so I see a sense of duplicity. And that is why I said we need to be cognizant, careful about the very framing of the debate. So delimitation is just an excuse, maybe because it has been something else in the past.
If I पूछ लें ये सवाल and then या बोलिए.
Delimitation की बात चल रहा है, तो उसमें इसके समाधान के लिए ऐसा नहीं किया जा सकता कि राज्यसभा में 100 की सीटें बढ़ा दी जाए या 100 मतलब बराबर सब राज्यों की सीटें कर दी जाए
या साउथ की सीटें बढ़ा दीजिए, क्योंकि ये विवाद इतना खतरनाक है कि अभी एक नेता को काफी दिन हो गए थे, मैंने सुना था कि साउथ के नेता को वो अलग देश बनाने की भी मांग कर रहे थे, तो ये कुछ ज्यादा ही खतरनाक नहीं हो जाएगा?
मिश्रा जी आप ये बोलिए।
इंडिया में जो फेडरलिज्म है वो कुछ लोग क्वासी फेडरलिज्म कहते हैं, लेकिन जो फेडरलिज्म है मैं इसको पर्सनली फेक फेडरलिज्म। आप पॉलिटिकल साइंस के स्टूडेंट हैं?
जो मोस्ट बेसिक फीचर्स हैं फेडरलिज्म के वो क्या है? एक, हु कैन अमेंड द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन। इंडिया में कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को अमेंड करने का पावर पार्लियामेंट को लगा, स्टेट्स हैव नो रोल। अमेरिका में ओनली स्टेट्स कैन चेंज द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन unless 3/4 of the states they come together in favor of a particular amendment, it cannot be amended. American Congress does not have the power. They can simply initiate an amendment, that's it. Unless it's ratified by 3/4 of the states, constitution cannot be amended. क्यों? क्योंकि वहां पे ट्रू फेडरलिज्म, वो आपको शायद पता होगा, कमिंग टुगेदर एंड होल्डिंग टुगेदर फेडरलिज्म. अमेरिका इज कमिंग टुगेदर फेडरलिज्म. सो दे वर इंडिपेंडेंट यूनिट्स व्हिच केम टुगेदर टू फॉर्म फेडरलिज्म. यहाँ पे ऐसा नहीं हुआ है. दूसरा इंपॉर्टेंट फीचर, हु हैज द रेजिडुअल पावर्स. अमेरिका का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बहुत पतला है, बस आर पार आप 10 मिनट में खत्म ऐसे ही लेके घूमते, कुछ नहीं है उस पर. क्यों? क्योंकि इट डील्स विद ओनली विद द फेडरल सिस्टम. इंडिया का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है. क्यों? क्योंकि उसमें जो यूनियन का भी है और स्टेट का भी है. स्टेट में भी छोड़ दीजिए, उसके बाद थर्ड टियर का भी है. तो इंडिया का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन जो है, तो रेजिडुअरी पावर वहां सारे स्टेट्स को है, इसलिए कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बहुत पतला है. बाकी स्टेट्स का सारा चीज बना. तो हु हैज द रेजिडुअरी पावर्स. इंडिया का जो फेडरलिज्म है उसमें एक और चीज, यहाँ पे बहुत सारी चीजें होती है. उसमें एक है कि फेडरलिज्म का बहुत ढिढोरा पीटा जाता है. लोगों को, मैक्सिमम लोगों को ये नहीं पता है कि यहाँ पार्लियामेंट को इतना पावर है कि स्टेट लिस्ट में 7th शेड्यूल में एक एक सब्जेक्ट पे पार्लियामेंट जब चाहे कानून बना सकती है. देयर आर सर्कमस्टांसेस. उसमें एक है कि 2/3 मेजोरिटी से अगर राज्यसभा में एक रेजोल्यूशन पास हो जाता है तो स्टेट लिस्ट के किसी भी सब्जेक्ट पे कानून बना सकता है. अगर 2 या उससे ज्यादा स्टेट एक असेंबलीज रेजोल्यूशन पास करके भेज दे तो वो स्टेट लिस्ट पे बना सकते हैं. इधर और 356 जब इम्पोज हो जाता है उसमें बना ही सकते हैं. नेशनल इमरजेंसी में उस समय बना सकते हैं. इधर सो कोई भी एरिया नहीं है तीनों लिस्ट में जिस पर पार्लियामेंट कानून नहीं बना सकती. और स्टेट जो है वो डिस्ट्रक्टिबल यूनिट्स. जम्मू कश्मीर स्टेट था, आज नहीं. और उत्तराखंड स्टेट नहीं था, आज है. तेलंगाना स्टेट नहीं था. सो पार्लियामेंट हैज पावर टू क्रिएट स्टेट्स एंड डिस्ट्रॉय स्टेट्स. तो स्टेट्स के रिप्रेजेंटेशन की बात कर रहे हैं. स्टेट एग्जिस्ट करेगा सेंटर की मर्जी पे, उसको रिप्रेजेंटेशन आ जाएगा.
सो ये जो आपके जो आप पहले वो जो एक दूसरा सवाल आपने पूछा था कि क्या हम राज्यसभा में सीट्स को बराबर नहीं कर सकते हैं. बराबर हम इसलिए नहीं कर सकते, और उसका उत्तर जो सत्यप्रकाश जी ने कहा उसी से फ्लो करता है कि देखिए, अमेरिका में हर स्टेट को सेनेट में 2 सीट्स क्यों दी गई हैं. सेनेट जो हमारी राज्यसभा से कंपेरेबल है, वो इसलिए दी गई हैं क्योंकि ये सारी स्टेट्स इंडिपेंडेंट थी पहले. इट वॉज अ कंडीशन ऑफ देयर पार्टिसिपेशन इन द फेडरेशन दैट in the Senate, each state will get 2 seats irrespective of its population. हम इंडिया में ये चीज इसलिए नहीं कर सकते कि हमारे यहाँ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ने ये प्रिंसिपल दिया है कि लोकसभा और राज्यसभा दोनों में ही सीट्स जो किसी भी यूनिट को, चाहे वो यूनियन टेरिटरी हो या स्टेट हो, वो दी जाएंगी. वो आबादी के आधार पर दी जाएंगी. और 60 लाख वाली जो बात पॉइंट आउट की थी वो उस पर अप्लाई होती है. जो वेल एक्सेप्टेड प्रिंसिपल है कि अगर कोई बहुत छोटी स्टेट है तो स्वाभाविक बात है, कोई स्टेट उससे 20 गुनी 30 गुनी ज्यादा बड़ी है आबादी में, तो आप ये आर्गुमेंट तो नहीं दे सकते कि एक स्टेट है इसको 0 रिप्रेजेंटेशन मिलना चाहिए पार्लियामेंट में. आपको नागालैंड जैसे 1900 इफ आई रिमेम्बर करेक्टली 63 में बनी थी, शायद उसकी आबादी तब 3 लाख थी. ऑलरेडी उस समय पर 8 या 9 लाख की आबादी पर एक लोकसभा सीट पहुंच गई थी. लेकिन जब नागालैंड आपने स्टेट बनाई है तो आपको कम से कम एक तो सीट लोकसभा में देनी पड़ेगी, तो इस पर तो कोई डिस्प्यूट है ही नहीं। बराबर क्यों नहीं कर सकते, उसमें एक प्रॉब्लम तो ये है जो मैंने आपको बैकग्राउंड की बताई, लेकिन जो दूसरी प्रॉब्लम है वो बड़ी गंभीर है कि बराबर बनाने से कोई लाभ नहीं हो सकता। उसका कारण ये है कि अमेरिकन सेनेट पावरफुल इसलिए नहीं है कि वहां पर हर स्टेट की 2 सीट्स हैं, नहीं, वहां की कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ने ही अमेरिकन सेनेट को इस तरह की पावर्स दी हैं, बिकॉज इट इज अ ट्रू फेडरेशन। जैसा कि सत्य प्रकाश जी ने कहा, उसको ऐसी पावर्स दी हैं डिफरेंट चीजों में, जैसे जजेस के अपॉइंटमेंट में है, दूसरे बहुत सारे सीनियर लेवल के अपॉइंटमेंट्स में है, जो पावर्स हमारी राज्यसभा को नहीं है। इसलिए आप रिट्रोस्पेक्टिवली इसको फिट करके कि हम सीट्स बराबर कर देंगे, फेडरलिज्म जिसको कहा जा रहा है, अचीव नहीं कर सकते हैं। और तीसरी उसमें परेशानी की बात देखिए ये है कि एक्चुअली तो जो स्टेट्स ये कह रही हैं उनका भी नुकसान हो जाएगा। नुकसान क्यों हो जाएगा उसकी स्टैटिस्टिक्स में आपको बताता हूं। अमेरिका में ईच स्टेट की 2 सीट्स हैं सेनेट में। यहां पर इंडिया में सपोज कीजिए आप 2 कर दो, लेट्स गो लाइक दिस, तो क्या होगा, 60 या 70 सीट की राज्यसभा बचेगी। अब राज्यसभा आप कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन रीराइट करके राज्यसभा को वैसा पावरफुल तो बना नहीं सकते, तो राज्यसभा इनसिग्निफिकेंट हो जाएगी। अब सपोज कीजिए आपने कहा कि नहीं 2 नहीं, हम 5 सीट लेंगे हर स्टेट की, 5 भी लेंगे तब भी राज्यसभा 150 के करीब अटक जाएगी। अब मान लीजिए आपने कहा कि नहीं, हम पैरिटी क्रिएट करेंगे, हम हर स्टेट को 10 सीट्स दे देंगे। अगर 10 दे देंगे तो लगभग 350 पर आ जाएगी, जो हम प्रपोज भी कर रहे हैं। लेकिन उसका रिजल्ट क्या होगा? उसका रिजल्ट ये होगा कि जो बड़ी बड़ी स्टेट्स हैं, जिसमें साउथ की भी स्टेट्स हैं, उनको तो 10 ही सीट्स मिलेंगी ईच स्टेट को, और जो गोवा है जिसकी 5 लाख आबादी है उसको भी 10 सीट मिल जाएंगी। तो क्या आप ऐसा चाहेंगे? दैट इज
गोवा शिफ्ट कर जाना।
See, there is one part of the book which I don't agree. Mishra ji has proposed that Rajya Sabha, so far as Rajya Sabha is concerned, so for Lok Sabha, population should be the criteria which has been there. For Rajya Sabha, as a sort of compromise, the number should be increased in proportion to the existing numbers. I am saying what is right for Lok Sabha should be right for the Rajya Sabha. So any deviation from the basic principle, it has to be frowned upon and strongly disapproved of. That part I don't agree.
मैं ये क्लैरिफाई कर दूं सर कि एक्चुअली मैंने लोकसभा और राज्यसभा दोनों का एज पर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल स्कीम पॉपुलेशन बेस्ड ही अपने 10th चैप्टर में पूरे प्रोजेक्शंस किए हैं बेस्ड ऑन 2011 सेंसस एंड 2026 सेंसस ऑफ इंडिया पॉपुलेशन। और इसमें इनफैक्ट आई कैन शो यू टेबल्स भी हैं और मैप्स भी हैं जिसमें दिखाया गया है कि राज्यसभा में कितनी सीट्स एक्चुअली ईच स्टेट को मिलेंगी। जैसे मैं आपको ये देखिए, ये राज्यसभा सीट्स का मैंने दिखाया है, यू कैन सी हियर, ये बबल मैप है, ये चार्ट है पॉपुलेशन बेस्ड जो है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल। वो मैंने एज ए ये कहा है कि सिंस देयर आर सेंटिमेंट्स रिलेटेड टू इट, पॉलिसी मेकर्स माइट वांट टू कंसिडर समथिंग लाइक दैट, दैट्स ऑल।
But I think agreement and disagreement are part of academic debate. And if there is something on which everybody has same opinion, maybe I don't think that's a opinion worth discussing. So there would be some things on which Satya Prakash ji may have a disagreement, I may have a disagreement, someone else may have a disagreement, and that's the whole point of having a discussion around the book. And we know that this is a 4th discussion, and I'm hoping that there would be many more discussion on this book. And we all agree, I think, on one point that this book is going to be in discussion for the next few years, till the time this actual limitation takes place.
And the controversy
settles down. So I think it's time to bring the discussion to a close. I would like to thank the author. Yes, you will get the last word because you are the host.
Because those who are missing from the representation, because I have been thinking about the idea of representation. There are many type of people who are not represented in Indian democracy, especially about women. Are we going to take up the issue of 35% reservation, 33% reservation for women, if we make this delimitation.
No, thereafter
It is hope that that will happen, but delimitation is a different process. It is a different process. If the government decides now this is the time we need to reserve seats for women, that's a different committee, maybe the same committee, but the process will be of two different kinds. So maybe it will happen, maybe it will not happen. Who knows?
If I may ask
In all
you,
probability, it might
so the
happen.
chair is of course indicating that it's ending. But if I may ask you on a lighter note, what is the, I'm asking you, what is the moral and philosophical defense for the argument that each group, whether constituted ethnically, racially, gender-wise, caste-wise, religion-wise, can be represented only by a person belonging to that group?
There is no
Moral or philosophical justification.
Even
I'm not going into the politics of it.
Even there is no moral or philosophical justification, even for male to represent a male.
Exactly.
Even for women or to women.
Yes.
It is
No, I'm not asking solely in the case of women. मैं general आपने चूंकि वो बात कही
On the other
इसलिए.
side also I'm saying.
जी.
So the question becomes irrelevant because the same
No, the question is
can be
not irrelevant. मैं question irrelevant इसलिए नहीं है. मेरा सवाल ये है कि जब ये बात किसी भी देश के लोकतंत्र में उठाई जाती है कि आपने कहा ना कि किसी ग्रुप का फेयर रिप्रेजेंटेशन नहीं है, तो मेरा प्रश्न ये है कि फेयर रिप्रेजेंटेशन आप किसको कहते हैं? आप शायद फेयर रिप्रेजेंटेशन इसको कह रहे हैं कि जो भी ग्रुप है, एज आई सेड, वेदर रेशियली कंस्टिट्यूटेड और रिलीजियस और कास्ट और जेंडर, unless that group gets representation in parliament more or less in accordance with its population, your implication is that it is not a fair representation.
Yes.
It flows from that, therefore, that if you are making this argument, it implies that you have to give some moral and philosophical or ethical defense of this argument that each group can be represented only by its own members. Now the further question is that if each group can be represented by only its own members, what is the constituent unit of a group? Because within a caste there are subcastes. Within a religion, there are three groups. So you have Ashraf, Ajlaf, Farzal among the Muslims. You have Catholics and Protestants and so many other groups among the Christians. So who will be the smallest constituent unit that would be the legitimate representative of the
That
group?
is exactly the difference between Indian democracy and other democracy. Indian democracy has left a huge space for identities. India has not forcefully secularized the society. Yeah, for example, Turkey. In Turkey,
Let's not get into this deep debate.
They have.
We have to focus on this.
They have made the use of surname illegal. So there is no surname in Turkey, not at all. So here,
We don't know whether it is good or bad. No judgment on that. Having a surname is good or not bad. Sajjan Kumar, Sanjay Kumar. पता नहीं अच्छा है बुरा है. कल देखेंगे, कल इसका फैसला करेंगे. I think we need to bring this to an end. ठीक है. Thank you to the chair.
Thank you very much.
People have asked the
I'm
question and the
delighted.
discussion.
I thank the
We have to
CSPS.
travel a long way.
And
Also one
of course, this distinguished panel, including Sanjay ji, Satya Prakash ji, Dr. Sajjan Kumar for their presence, and I once again thank CSPS for inviting me here. It has been a very meaningful and lively discussion. It has been my pleasure. And I thank all members of the audience, especially the young persons, because the fact is that it is the young persons
Because they listen.
to whom the
Professor बैठते हैं तो कोई सुनता ही नहीं है किसी को.
We are, most of us are in a way, much older than young people, students. So obviously we have this expectation that younger people will take the lead in future. It doesn't matter from which part of India or which identity they belong to. But thank you very much.